In today's video I'm going to show you how to make these beautiful Cornish pasties, keeping it as traditional as possible with a beautiful short crust pastry, a nice simple filling, and then baking them to golden perfection. So here's everything you need for the pastry, and now for the filling. We'll begin this recipe by making the pastry, and the pastry choice is essential for a good Cornish pasty. So today I'm making it with short crust pastry, and it'll be a nice, tough, strong pastry to hold all of that wonderful filling. You can also use a rough puff, but I wouldn't recommend using the puff pastry because a puff pastry is a little bit too light and it just won't hold the filling very well. So begin by placing 500 grams of strong white bread flour into a mixing bowl. You can use plain or all-purpose flour as well for this, but this is a pastry that will need kneading slightly, so we want it to be really strong, get that gluten activated, and bread flour works really well for that. Next, add in a teaspoon of salt, and then we need to place in the fat. For that, I've got 120 grams of lard and 120 grams of butter. If you can't find lard, don't worry, just use double the amount of butter. Next, you need to rub the ingredients together between your fingers and thumbs until it looks like breadcrumbs. You can also do this stage quite easily in a food processor, but I like to show how it's done by hand, just in case you don't have a food processor at home. So once it reaches a breadcrumb or a sand-like consistency, add in 175 milliliters of cold water and mix it together until it forms a dough. So once your dough's come together and looks something like this, you can then flour the worktop, because with this dough we need to knead it slightly. And generously flour your workbench, by the way, because you need that extra flour there just to help you knead it without it sticking to your hands. Normally with a short crust pastry you don't need it because you want it to stay as crumbly as possible, but with this one we want it to be as tough as possible, so we need to activate that gluten, help it become elastic, and then we have a tougher, stronger pastry for our Cornish pasties. So take your pastry out, and then we're just going to simply knead it until it feels smooth and elastic. It doesn't take much kneading, just 3 or 4 minutes will do. So you can see now it looks nice and smooth, and I think that's about ready. So next we need to wrap it up and place it in the fridge for a minimum of 1 hour. But to be honest, the longer you leave it, the better. The more time the dough has to relax, the easier it is to roll it out later on. So while our pastry is chilling in the fridge, we'll get everything ready for our filling. And we'll start with 300 grams of a waxy variety of potato. This is because the waxy variety will hold its shape when it's in the oven, but if you use a floury one, it will disintegrate more easily in the pasty. So simply just peel them and dice them into 1 centimeter cubes. Next we need 150 grams of swede. This is a swede, not a turnip. Some people call them turnip, but we want the yellow swede, not the white small turnip. And you just want to peel and dice that around the same size as the potatoes as well. And next I've got 150 grams of brown or yellow onion, and I'm going to peel and dice that up as well. You can place all 3 of those ingredients into a mixing bowl and mix them together. So next we need to add the meat, and for this I've got 400 grams of beef skirt or sirloin steak. It's up to you which one you want to use, or whatever you can get your hands on. Skirt is the traditional Cornish pasty meat, because it's got fat marbling through. It can handle a decent amount of time cooking in the oven while still staying tender and creating a beautiful gravy. And the same goes for sirloin. I'm using sirloin today, so all I'm going to do is simply slice this up nice and thin, and then I'm going to mix that through with our vegetables. So that's our filling just about ready, but there's one final step, and that'll be to season it with salt and black pepper. I don't want to do that just yet, because if we add salt now, it'll draw the water out of the vegetables and even out of the meat and create a watery mixture, and I don't want that. So I'll be seasoning it just before it goes into our pastry. So now our pastry is ready to roll out, and we want to roll it out on a floured surface to around 2 to 3 millimeters in thickness. Now this amount of pastry should do 6 pasties, and I use a plate to cut my shape out. This is just a side plate. It's roughly around 20 centimeters, so anything you've got of that size to use as a guide, go ahead and use it. So I'm going to lightly flour the workbench and the pastry and the rolling pin and then roll it out. Turn your pastry 90 degrees between rolls and this just helps to stop it from sticking to your bench. I'll then cut a couple of rounds for our pasties and then I'll have to re-roll the pastry. Repeat this process until you've got 6 rounds. Lay the pastry rounds out onto your workbench and then we are almost ready to start filling our pasties. But first what we need to do is generously season our mix. So a nice big pinch of salt, roughly around a teaspoon, and then a good grind of black pepper. And I've been told, don't be shy with the black pepper. Mix it through so it's evenly coated and then share the mixture out evenly over the 6 pastry pieces, piling it up in the center. And before we close them up, you can finish them with a few extra cubes of butter. To seal up and crimp our pasties, brush around the edges with a little bit of beaten egg, or you can even just use water for this, and then fold it over and press those edges together. Once you've got them pressed, you can shuffle the filling so it's nice and tight in the middle. Press firmly around the edges again, and then crimp over the pastry. Now I do this just by placing my finger down and then bringing the pastry over with my other hand, kind of over the top of my finger, and then I just do them one finger width apart all the way around until I've completed the whole pasty. We can then place our pasties onto a baking tray lined with greaseproof paper before brushing them with egg wash, making a couple of holes in the top to allow the steam to escape, and then placing into a preheated oven at 165 degrees Celsius fan for 50 to 55 minutes until golden and completely cooked through. And there we go, look at those beautiful golden Cornish pasties. Let's cut into one and see what it's like inside. That filling just looks perfect. I hope you enjoy this recipe and try it out for yourself. If you do, tag me in it, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.